Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl and welcome to a very windy Portugal. We've come here to give you the first look at the test drive of the new Peugeot 208. We'll be taking an in-depth look at the diesel, the petrol, and of course, the very much anticipated new electric 208. In an age in which a lot of things are made to look uniform and you could say a little boring, it is really exciting, genuinely, to see that Peugeot have decided to go all out on their redesign of the 208. Now, they've done that for a wide variety of reasons, not least of which is that this is the first time this car has been designed as a platform with the idea of fitting it out with an electric body as well. So we have this designed for all three drivetrains, hopefully optimized for each of them. In keeping with that, the styling has massively changed. If you look at the old 208, you could argue that it is a little bit dated now. It's very bulbous in its design and it just looks a lot more 90s than 2000s. This car changes all of that. Look at this new angularity. Well, right from the face, you can see that everything has been rethought here. So this is the Allure trim line, and that means we have some certain design features that are specific to this. But the face of the 208 stays the same irrespective as to which model you go for. It's just those styling details that change a little bit. So the first thing are these striking lights. Look at the way they carve straight into the bumper. It makes a very specific statement and it's in keeping with the rest of the line. So if you're familiar with the redesign of the 508, you'll find a lot of the DNA there still present in this car. It's really modern, aggressive and stylish. Look at the way this grille presents. Look at the way that the lower front of the car is designed to look sporty and agile. It's almost completely different from the predecessor. I love the angularity. I love the way that everything wraps into the side. The car looks fantastically sporty and dynamic from the front. Does that follow through to the side though? Let's take a closer look. That radically different aesthetic continues round here at the side. 4 meters and 2 or 158 inches in length. This car is now 5 centimeters. That's approximately this much longer than the predecessor, but significantly 4 centimeters shorter in height. And you can see quite what a difference that has made. Now, as you look at the car in profile here, the car is available with 15 to 17 inch, depending on the model that you go for. I really like the styling of the larger wheel for this car. It's not absurdly large, it's just nice, and I can tell you it rides well too. Now, different for this trim line versus others is that here we have body matching color on the wheel arches, and that does make the car look a little bit more as you would expect it to. If you go for different trim lines, you can have a stark black contrast here, and that makes those wheels appear even larger and more aggressive. But in total, as you can see, the one significant thing about the styling detail from the side is just how convincing the swoop of this roofline is. Starting with the crease of the bonnet, your eye is visually drawn right the way along this design as it swoops into the back, finished off of course by this spoiler at the back. What that effect gives you is very much one of motion in a car that isn't moving, and that's really nice to see in a smaller car. You look at this and you immediately think hot hatch. Are we harking back to earlier design details when these cars really were pocket rockets, or could be at least? The only issue I have with that right off the bat is it's promising me an awful lot of fun in the driving experience, and I have to wonder, is it going to live up to the look once I sit behind the wheel? Now we come to the rear of the car, and my goodness, what a difference a redesign can make. This feels so much more sporty and agile than the predecessor. I really like the way that the big back, which is so necessary on modern cars, has been nicely aesthetically set off by this spoiler at the top. Nothing here is overblown, it's just nicely all tied together. This black strip across the back joining up the lights, mirroring the top as we have, and then again at the bottom. So all of the accents are tied together to compress the visual slightly to stop it looking too bulbous. Nice angularity at the top, nice roundness at the bottom. Really, it makes a small package look very convincing indeed. Now, obviously, all of this design is going to come at some sort of cost. You can't go from what was quite a round back to now a nice angular swooping line without having some impact on the storage at the rear. So let's take a closer look and find out. Well, okay, we may have a little bit of camera equipment happening back here, but I can tell you what you're looking at is now 265 litres of load space. And if you're wondering, that is 20 litres less than the predecessor. But before you say, come on, a smaller boot, I have to point out, most of that space has been lost up here with this angularity. And 99% of the time, all of the load you're going to be putting in is here. Now, there's always going to be a little bit of compromise going on with the boot because, of course, this car has been designed to work with 3 different powertrains. Yes, you've guessed it, the electric is the one that has the biggest demands in terms of its space usage. So in order to make the experience as uniform as they can across all 3 of those powertrains, obviously the batteries have to go somewhere. This car, being a petrol, clearly doesn't have any, but that space in the chassis has still been carved out. So when you take that into account, I have to say, I think 265 litres of load is more than sufficient. This is all of Holger's camera equipment. As you can see, it comes below the lip, so we still have plenty of space up here for extra storage. Meaning, if you want to take this car away camping for the weekend, honestly, you've got more than enough space. And don't forget, the seats fold flat, so if you need that bit of extra room, you can always fit more in. Well, you can have your choice between 3 different petrol engines or 1 diesel or 1 electric. And what you're looking at here is the second in power of the 2 petrol engines. They stretch from 75 horsepower at the bottom end up to 130 at the top. This is the 100 horsepower mid-engine. It's petrol and it is a 3-cylinder 1.2 litre. If you want to go with the diesel, you're looking at a 1.5 litre. That is going to produce 100 horsepower, and of course the electric is an entirely different animal. Now, for my taste and my money, depending on what you like, I'm going to say unusually, if you want to go with the petrol, the mid-engine is a very nice choice to make. Why? Well, if you go with the mid-engine, it's actually got surprisingly more pep and pickup than you might expect. If you go with 130 horsepower, for me, it's just not quite as exciting as you might like. So this, to me, represents the best in terms of balance of economy and power if you want to go petrol. The diesel is a different animal all over again, but I think you already know. If I get my pick of any of the power platforms at the moment, I am going to go 100% electric. So the outside, bold, dynamic, stylish. Does the interior match? Let's find out. Well, again, this is the Allure line, so if you're not a huge fan of any of the particular styling details, bear in mind that other lines are available, and that does have a fairly significant impact on both the trim level of the seats and just a couple of accent details that maybe aren't your favorite thing in the world. For mine, on this particular car, that would be this here. I think that's a little bit of a disappointment because the car is so stylishly finished. That's just a bit of an 80s throwback to me, and this lime green stitching, so it's not my taste, but I'm sure somebody will really like it. The design elements that don't change between the cars are these carbon effects that you can see on the doors and also on the dashboard of the car, and of course the instrument layout and that famous steering wheel. Well, I have to tell you, I think it's astonishing what they've achieved with this car. Redesigning a car from the ground up, you could think gives you limitless opportunity, but it also is limitless risk because you've already built a very loyal customer base. What happens if you completely alienate them? Well, that's going to hurt you, and if you don't bring on board new customers with a new refreshed version of the design, then clearly you're not going to bring anyone new into the party. So when Peugeot decided to go for this, boy, oh boy, they really did decide to go for it. Now, we are going to take a look in lots more detail to show you all of those new features. Well, the first thing we need to talk about is these seats. They are very contemporary in look and feel and very modern and stylish. So, does that really add up to a seat that's going to actually be comfortable to use? Well, let's find out. I am 5 feet 10 in height or 178 centimeters. This seat can go a little lower, so if I put that on its lowest possible setting, you can see that I have more than enough headroom at the top. Now, this car is fitted with a panoramic roof. That's obviously going to cost you a little bit in height, but as you can see, I'm more than comfortable. Now, I have a particularly long torso and particularly short legs, so if you're looking at me wondering how would I fit, you're going to be more than comfortable in this car if you're under 6 foot, 6'1", and there's more than enough space for you. However, this is a point worth noting. The first thing you're going to do when you step into the car is set the seat so it's at the right distance and change the position of the steering wheel. And I think it's worth noting, as you can see there, you don't have the widest amount of motion available to you on adjustment. So this car, almost uniquely in its class, I would say, it's really important for you to sit in it and make sure that your body geometry works for it. Now, obviously, you can't design every car with every single person in mind. Some work better for others. But this one is a challenge in particular because of your sight line between the new display, more on that later, and this specific type of steering wheel design. I think it's going to work very effectively for most people. But really, if you're not one of those people, it could drive you fully insane trying to find a comfortable driving position. So please check that out for yourself. Now, the seat itself is really very pleasing indeed. We've yet to find out how it's going to behave once we start driving, but it has just the right balance between grip, which allows you to feel confident doing a little bit more sporty driving, and comfort that means that you're going to enjoy the experience that little bit more. Really pleased with the job that Peugeot have done with the seat redesign. Not only does it look right for the interior, but it actually feels fantastic too. So, how does that tie in to all of the changes that have taken place here? Let's take a closer look. Well, my goodness, there is absolutely no possibility for you to sit in this car and mistake it for anything else. Peugeot really have gone for it here. And I say all the better for having done it. This is supposed to be a leap into the future of design for them. And it really is something different to look at. Now, I'm actually going to switch the engine on just to make sure the screens don't turn off so we can have a proper look at them. Well, the very first thing to mention is this latest version of the iCockpit from Peugeot. You're not going to be able to see this effectively on camera, so I will do my best to explain it to you. There are, in effect, two screens here. So what you have almost appears to be a screen floating in front of another screen, where you can see this 0 at the front, and then above it, the speed restriction sign. There appears to be a visual difference of approximately an inch between the one and the other. Now, Peugeot say the reason for them having done this, other than purely stylistically, is because research tells them that when you break down the information from one level to another, it allows you to concentrate on the most important information visually. So they claim that that results in a faster reaction time at speed of around about 4 car lengths difference in braking distance. Well, that's an enormous claim. I'm not sure if it's true, but it's quite an exciting thought if it is. And in the meantime, clearly the important question is, does it impact on your attention while driving? Well, if I just cycle through a couple of these menus, you can see that the digital display is somewhat overwhelming. There is so much here to choose from, so many different layouts you can have. And as is in keeping with standard Peugeot design, everything has been maximized for visual effects. So, on one hand, that's good. The animations are great. The processor speed is fast enough to make the changes really pretty fluid. For my personal taste, I don't really need a lot of fancy looking stuff. What I need is the information I want to be quickly, accurately, and easily displayed. These animations look very nice. I think ideally I would like it if they just instantly switched. But that said, let's be honest about driver preference. For the most part, you're not going to be cycling through all of these menus while you're driving. So that means you can pick the display to work exactly the way you like it. According to Peugeot, you're going to get the information you really need overlaid on top, so it won't distract you from everything else that you can see, and it should work fairly effectively. Whether or not that happens when you're actually driving the car, well, we'll find out a little bit later. But in the meantime, This is a 10-inch display. Now, we have here the top infotainment system, and that means we have a 10-inch display here too. Now, unfortunately, all of the test cars that we had available to pick from all came with the top infotainment unit. Why is that unfortunate? Well, I know you guys know that I like buttons and tiles, but I have to say, I think this is missing a couple. So if we come slightly further down, you can see what you might recognize from the 508, this piano key style layout in order to select various features, AC off, AC max, you get the general idea. In the largest top infotainment system, you don't get any buttons either side. Instead, we have a range of buttons that are inset behind these piano keys. Now, I will tell you in testing so far, I do not find those intuitive to use. It is a little frustrating when you simply want to make an adjustment to the air conditioning. If I simply want on or off, that works extremely well with these two large buttons here. But if I want to make any detail change, I have to press this button, and then I have to press these on the screen. Now, they do work well, and they are pretty straightforward, but needless to say, not that straightforward. So, for my taste, I'm not quite ready to give up on all of my buttons. I still would like a few more, but thank you for at least leaving me with an old-fashioned, straightforward volume dial for the stereo. So, that's the infotainment and the controls down here. What about further down? Well, again, stylistically, we have some nice touches. Now, this car doesn't have it fitted because it is one of the lower models, but I wanted to show you this pad should be inductive charging on the higher ones. Now, this is an interesting design feature. You can put your phone here. I'm a little worried as to what happens to the phone should you need to brake rapidly and you have a middle passenger in the rear. But I guess that would be exactly the same if I had it on this shelf as well. What I do like is that I can put it here. If I've gone with inductive charging, and I definitely would suggest that you do, I can close it up and forget all about it. Now, all of the 208s come standard with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so that means you're probably going to want a permanent connection. And when you want to go for that, you have a USB-C on this side and a standard USB over on the right. Very useful, a little bit annoying for cable management, I would say, but certainly not the end of the world and definitely no worse than any other car at the moment. Underneath that, a decently sized storage tray we can use to fit a passenger's phone, and a nicely placed 12-volt charge point. So you can charge multiple devices without being bothered by them while you're driving, and I think that's a really nice touch for a modern car. Coming slightly further back, we have gone with the 6-speed gearbox. Now, if you're going with the lowest of the petrol engines, that's the 75 horsepower one, you're going to get that with a 5-speed manual. Go one higher up to the 100 horsepower petrol engine, and you have a choice there between a 6-speed manual or an 8-speed automatic. The top line comes with an 8-speed automatic, and if you want to go with the diesel, that is only available as a 6-speed manual. Now, watch this. That's first, that's second, that's third, that's fourth, fifth, sixth. For a modern car, there is a huge amount of travel on this gearbox. Once you have it in gear, it's actually very nice to use and operate. But for the type and profile of the car, I think the stick could have been at least an inch shorter. I'm not quite sure why they've gone with this height. It could be that older drivers prefer that range of motion. It's easier and less stressful for them to use. But for younger drivers, I think something a little bit more sporty and dynamic than this would have been perfect. All modern cars have a learning curve that you can experience by using the latest versions of their infotainment system. This car is no different. Why do I mention that? Well, if you've decided that you want to give this car a test drive and you get going in it and you find this a little overwhelming, trust me, you're not alone. What's important to know is that you will get used to it. However, I have to tell you, as much as processors are getting better all the time, the experience of using this screen is not quite as slick as it could be. In order to limit fingerprints and glare, it has a matte finish, which makes it feel just not as glassy smooth as we're all used to from tablets and phones. So it's not the nicest thing to interact with, but it does work fine. And as I said, if you find it overwhelming at first, when you start using it, honestly, it won't take you any time at all to set it up just the way you like it. Now, I really like to show you this. I bring this with me on all of my car tests. It is a 750 milliliter water bottle. Significant, obviously, because that is a standard sizing for any bottle of water. And in a small car, it's imperative for me that there is enough room in the door pocket to take it. Look at that. That's a really nice piece of design. Even though it's a small car, there is still more than enough room just at the bottom here to fit anything you could need into this pocket. Now we come to the rear of what is a small car. So can you actually get any degree of comfort back here? Well, yes you can. That's the pleasing response. So first things first, the seats. Well, it's not going to come as a huge shock to you to learn they are not nearly as comfortable as the ones in front, but they are primarily designed for shorter distances and, of course, children. The nice news here is that there is plenty of legroom. Again, I have really short legs. So when you're looking at the amount of space between my knees and the seat in front, you should bear in mind that not only do I have short legs in the back, but the driving seat is set for me. The good news is the passenger seat is set for Holger, and he is considerably taller. Look, there's still plenty of room back here. So I'm going to be very comfortable on that score. One place I'm not going to be massively comfortable is up here. Well, again, I have a particularly long torso. So for height purposes, you can compare me to around about 6 foot or 6'1", believe it or not, in the upper half of my body. So, you know, it's okay. I don't think I would mind going on even a relatively long journey in this car. I just have to crunch over a little bit. You know what? I think I'm prepared to make that sacrifice. I think by far and away, the majority of rear seat passengers in this car are going to be children or older people, and we all know they shrink anyway, right? But let's say that you have to drive around with other adults. Around town, it's going to be more than fine. I do have enough space to be comfortable back here, and I do like the particular touches that they put in here for the rear seat passengers. This is nice for a car of this level. 2 rear seat charging USB sockets. That's going to stop any end of arguments. And of course, with these convenient pockets in the back, there is space for your children to put their electronics as well. If we're still talking about elderly relatives, do they have electronics? I don't know. But if they do, and they like to play Minecraft while you're driving them to see the doctor, at least they'll have a good way to charge it. Well, we managed to get our hands on the most powerful of the petrol engines available. So that is still a 3-cylinder engine, 1.2 litres, but 130 horsepower. What does that mean? Well, it means that we can actually get from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour or 62 miles per hour in 8.7 seconds. Not too shabby. But, of course, that doesn't change the suspension, the braking, the road handling, and everything else. So I'm really excited to see how that additional power translates once you actually get it out on the road. All right, looks like we're good to go. So let's see how this compares. Now, when we were out earlier on, my feeling was that for a city car, the diesel or one of the weaker petrols are going to provide you with more than enough power for day-to-day use. The only area in which you were lacking a little bit was in the fun element. Well, clearly, that's what we should be getting from this more powerful engine experience. You're going to have a little bit of compromise on the efficiency, but not too much. After all, it's still the same small, efficient engine. So hopefully it should just mean stacks more fun. Well, I am pleased to say that since we put a lot more miles down on the car, some things that initially I wasn't quite sure how well I was going to be able to get used to did melt away into insignificance. Largely, that's the digital display. At first, it does take a little bit of adjustment to get used to, but the nice thing about it is there are so many elements and aspects of it that you can change that you really quickly figure out that you can set it up the way you like it. I'm even pleased to tell you that as much as I traditionally intensely dislike having heating and cooling controls work through the infotainment system, these piano keys down here actually do a very good job of the 2 most important functions that you have. And what are they? Well, we're in Portugal right now, so On and off. That's as complicated as it needs to be. I'm happy to tell you, you don't have to ruin your sat nav. You don't have to root through menus to get to those controls. So the more you use this car, the more familiar the setups go. I don't think I'm ever going to be convinced about the back row of buttons beyond these piano keys. They're not distinct enough for my liking. But you know what? It's quirky, it's different, it's fun. You will get used to it, and it does get better the more you use it. So around town, well, we know that the car is very polite and well behaved. It ought to be. This is its primary environment that it's happiest in. But what I think we all want to know is, what happens to those extra horses once you find a bit of open road? Well, we really wanted to try and find you a spot to show you what the real-world acceleration of this car looks like when you actually want to access it. Now, there are drive modes available here, so the first thing is to make sure that it's in sport mode, and then we just have to wait for a little bit of empty road so we can open it up and show you what it does. And here we go. That's foot flat down on the floor. And that is a 0 to 100 time, hypothetically, of 8.7 seconds. Well, I don't know what your visual experience of that was. It's not quite as satisfying as you would like. This is the most powerful of the engines that are currently available. And because of that, I think you just want a little bit more bite, a little bit more heft. There is unquestionably a turbo lag that's evident pretty much everywhere in the range between you putting your foot down and asking for power and actually receiving it. Now, in order to show you exactly what I mean, I'm going to drop the speed down to 90. Again, I'm in sport mode, so theoretically, this is the best the car has to offer me. And here we go. I'm going to slow it down a little further still. Let's go from 85 and now that's not the least responsive thing you've ever driven. That actually does give you enough in the way of power to be satisfactory. But is it what you want from the performance of the largest engine? That I don't know so much about. You know, this car's a very interesting proposition. In previous years, I would have been delighted with just about everything. It really does well right across the board. Driving position, great. All around visibility, it's okay, it's not bad. I'm prepared to make that compromise for the really fantastic styling it has. Infotainment system, well, again, is it quite my cup of tea? Possibly not, but you know, it's fresh, it's innovative, it's new, it's stylish, and I'm prepared to make some compromise for that too. Styling, all around fantastic. Handling, steering, not bad. Crisp, taut enough, reasonably weighted, not enough at speed, but pretty good. Pretty fun around tighter, more winding roads. Performance, not bad, certainly not best in class, but also certainly not worst. It's not as if the 208 fails to deliver on any individual level. It's just that when you put everything together, the sum of its parts just feels somehow as if it should just be that little bit more. It does feel exciting, fresh, new, dynamic, really everything that I would have wanted to have seen from the evolution of the 208. But it is an evolution, not a revolution. That's been our experience so far, but that's been with the internal combustion engine. I wonder just how much we'll change our minds when we have a chance to find out how well they've delivered the fully electric model. Now it's time for us to put the electric 208 through its paces. So this comes equipped with a 50 kilowatt hour electric battery, and that means, according to the stated data, that you get 340 kilometers or 240 miles of range. Well, of course, those are stated figures, so the keen question is always, how does that relate to real world usage? Well, I'm happy to tell you that even if you're pushing this car quite hard and using a lot lot of the different electric draining facilities that it has, you should still comfortably be looking at an over 200-mile range. And that's really important. In terms of getting the balance right between the weight, the performance, and the range on electric vehicles, it's very difficult to find the sweet spot. I would say, although it's purely anecdotal, that for most people's peace of mind, what they want to know is that they can get definitely 200 miles out of the batteries. Why? Well, it's just something that you feel that you want to be able to do is a round trip of 100 miles each way. Now, I think for range anxiety reasons, you're probably not going to want to take it to that. But according to Peugeot and their data and customer research, most people don't drive more than 50 kilometers a day standardly in their car. The reason this is significant is they're saying that a lot of users should be able to get by only charging this car once a week. Now, I think that's a nice marketing idea in real world terms, just like when a mobile phone provider tells you, yeah, sure, it goes for 2 days. I don't think realistically that's how most people are going to be using it. But what I can tell you is that if you're using this car even heavily throughout the vast majority of average driving needs, you're going to be more than comfortable using it in the daytime, putting it on charge overnight, even a trickle charge, which, let's be honest, is better for the battery system anyway, and enjoying it the next day. I don't think the vast majority of users should ever have a reason to be distressed about this range. Is the technology quite ready yet to replace all of your internal combustion engine car needs? Probably not. As a family, I'm still going to say your best place to have one electric, one non-electric, because it takes care of everything else. But for the vast majority of users, we are now finally in a place where you can feel good about owning an electric car and not worrying about the implication of it for your day-to-day life. So that's all the technology. How does it connect to the experience of the car itself? Well, this is where we get into being really, really exciting. This car as a platform was designed from the ground up to work for all of its powertrains. So the idea was basically, in theory, that whatever powertrain you want to go with, petrol, diesel, or electric, once you factor in servicing, lifetime running costs, you're going to be looking at a very similar level of expenditure. Well, that's a nice idea, and it's not new to Peugeot. I've heard that quoted an awful lot before from different manufacturers. In reality, however, it depends on your local market, it depends on your particular service costs, and it definitely depends upon any government incentives that allow you to buy the electric platform. But let's go with it for now and assume, all things being equal, you really can own one of these cars at the same cost as the diesel or petrol. Well, then which one should you go with? Well, for me, this is the full realization of the 208. Now, realistically, Peugeot are saying that they don't expect to be selling more than about 10% of total sales volume in electric to start with. But that's only because it takes a paradigm shift in order for people to say, okay, I can live with not worrying about the range and I'm ready to make that change. That aside, for me, this is the full realization of this car. Why? Well, it's the way everything sits together. If you drive the petrol or the diesel, there's something a little bit missing there for me. It's a great experience. It's a really nicely, fully realized car, but all of the components don't quite add up to that little something extra that for me you can have with other platforms. The styling is so modern, it's stylish, it's really nice, the car feels fun and excellent to drive, but something's a little missing. You know what's funny? The minute you start driving the electric one, everything that was missing is instantly there, and it's really nice. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of cars, the extra weight of the electric batteries really has a detrimental effect on the performance and the drive. Bizarrely, for the 208, that extra weight really makes the car feel like it was designed to take it. Suddenly, any notion you had that things were feeling a little bit too light and not quite solid enough absolutely disappear. So, the steering, it's still not quite as responsive as you might like, but that makes more sense with the extra weight. You have a little bit more wiggle room in order to gain the benefit of the driving experience. The whole modern, stylish layout, that just adds up and makes sense when you put it with the electric platform. But all of that aside, really, The single most outstanding benefit you're going to get with the electric platform that you can't get with the petrol or the diesel is that additional sudden burst of power. 8.1 seconds, this thing will go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, 62 miles per hour in, and you really feel the benefit of that in all driving conditions. What do I mean by that? I mean that around town, it's nippy, it's agile, it's everything you would want a small car to be. You don't absolutely notice that extra weight at all, but once you get it out and onto country roads with a little bit of bending and winding in them, you really can feel the benefit in the drive. It makes this car every bit the amount of fun that you hoped it would be from the get-go. So far, I'm 2 big thumbs up on this. It's really a lot of fun. So, we have just passed through the most horrible roadworks. We're through it now. Look at that. The effortless way in which that power is delivered is just so pleasing. Yeah, it's not going to blow your mind, but for this style and type of car, it's great. Obviously, because it's electric, we really have the benefit of the isolation on the cabin noise, and it's just extremely pleasant to be sitting here. In everyday use, you're going to need to know how you're going to charge this thing. Needless to say, there are a wide range of options that you can apply, largely depending on whether you want to use an AC or a DC charging platform. The AC is the lower one, of course. That is 11 kilowatts. If you want to go with the DC, you can get up to 100. Now, clearly that massively impacts on charging speed. For home usage, realistically, you've got 3 different options. You can either go with the standard plug and charge, that's clearly the longest. You can go with having a 2-phase wall box fitted, or a 3-phase. 3-phase is the most powerful, and therefore, depending on your local system, that's going to be the most expensive. But because of these batteries, what I really like about this car, because it's not pushing too far to deliver either on power, acceleration, anything else, it really is trying to offer you something that's balanced and well-rounded. I think the vast majority of people will be perfectly fine just plugging the thing in at home overnight. Obviously, you're going to have lots of capacity to deal with the app and the technology to plan your usage, blah, 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 blah. That's all very exciting. But what 99% of people want to know is, can I just use it and get on with my life? I don't want to have to plan my trips. I don't want to have to interfere with an app that tells me what I want to do and where I want to go. I just want to get in my car when I want to drive somewhere and go. Well, this for me represents the first, of the real opportunity for you to take an electric car and treat it the way that you've previously treated a petrol. You don't have to care about the range the same way you used to. And brilliantly, the drive is now not only equal to, but in this car, better than its internal combustion engine equivalents. It's just great. It looks like the future, it feels like the future, it drives like the future. So, even if you are very opposed to the idea, give it a test drive alongside the diesel and the petrol and see what you think. Now, maybe you can't make the numbers add up just yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to keep coming down in future, and I would really like to know, honestly, which one of these 3 driving experiences you find the best. For me, it's a no contest. I would go electric every single time. This car really excites me, and to me, it delivers on all of the promises that it made at Geneva. How will it behave in the real world when you own it for a matter of years and you have to see if all of those longer term usage promises are really kept? Well, that's another question entirely. But for now, as a new car to market, I'm not only impressed, I think it's excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the driving modes. Well, in keeping with my philosophy that the secret to the success of the electric car is to be able to offer you as close to the convenience as you get of a petrol car without anybody noticing at all, the driving modes are something that originally were introduced to electric cars so they could continue to make the claims of their range. Obviously, that meant you driving them in the most awful conditions because they limited the functionality of the car so much to preserve power. Well, I've always felt that until you could drive them in their optimum driving modes without being that bothered about the range, they really weren't quite ready to be making those claims. Well, I think we're getting pretty close. At the moment we're driving an Eco, and as you can see, if I put my foot down, I'm still getting an acceleration out of this car that is more than comparable with either of its internal combustion engine brothers. Now, if I put it into sports mode, clearly it stops caring so much about what the impact is on the batteries, and immediately the pickup is a lot more lively. But the important point to mention is it just doesn't matter. We're now into a generation of electric vehicles that are concentrated on the ability to deliver you a very pleasant driving experience, irrespective of how you use them, without that range anxiety kicking in. And that makes an enormous difference to how you're able to use them. We find ourselves in the available diesel, which is a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder engine. That's going to give you 100 horsepower, took me a while to remember there, and it's going to deliver you a 0 to 62 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour speed of 11.4 seconds. It's paired up with a 6-speed manual gearbox, and there is no option available for the automatic with the diesel engine. So, what does all of that add together to make? Let's talk about driving situation first. Really noticeable in this 208 versus the predecessor is that I have a lot more presence on the road. I'm sitting more upright, I'm sitting slightly higher up, and I feel that I'm in a much more dominating position. All-round visibility is not bad. Now, I have to tell you that I get the best out of this car, specifically because I have a long torso but short legs. Therefore, my driving position is very far forwards into the cockpit, and because of that, I can still see quite a lot of information between my headrest and the B-pillar. If, however, I had a slightly different geometry, and a lot of drivers will, you might find that you have a very large black spot in this car, and that is well worth checking out. As far as the mirrors and the glass all around the car, you do notice that those big structural pillars do make quite a lot of difference to the available amount of information that you're able to take in just by a quick sweep of the head. You get used to that quickly enough, but it is worth mentioning just in case you particularly like to have lots of glass. Now, most important detail of the drive so far is this seat. It is absolutely fantastic. We've now had the opportunity to put a fair few miles down onto this car, and Holger and I both agree that the combination of suspension and the seats makes for an extremely comfortable ride. What's particularly great about these seats is if you throw the car around a little bit to make the most of the dynamic drive, then you'll still be held nice and comfortably while you have all of the protection you need from the rough bits in the road. The tyre selection on this car is an interesting one. The cabin sound isolation works particularly well on some road surfaces, but really not at all on others. So I suspect that's a combination of the wheel size and the tyre profile. Don't worry, after the car's been out for a while, there will be all kinds of options available, and I think you're going to be able to do slightly better with the sound that's delivered based on the road surface you're driving on. Now, the drive itself. Well, let's go from top down. So road presence is really nice, position in the car is good, seat is fantastic, steering, it's okay, it's a little bit spongy though. It's not bad. My suspicion is that it's been optimized for round town driving, and that is the vast majority of everyone who's ever likely to be buying this car. So I can't complain too much, but I am comparing it directly with another couple of cars within this class, and I'm thinking of that crisp, taut, dynamic handling that really makes the best of even small engines once you start really playing around with the car. So I would have liked it to be just a bit more responsive. On the plus side though, a lot of people are going to have some reservations about this steering wheel, and I find it actually lots of fun. The more dynamic your driving style, the more immediate and responsive you will find the physical wheel itself. It really speaks nicely to this car. Only drawback is, because of this particular design, you need to look over the top of it directly at the driver's display. If your body geometry doesn't quite work for that, you could find yourself with a lot of steering wheel right in the middle of the thing that you're actually trying to look at. So, worth checking out and making sure that it's right for you. Gearbox, well, I'm a little surprised here. The gearbox itself is not bad, Once you actually have the car in gear, it's lively and responsive. I like that. What I don't understand is the length of travel on the gear stick itself. It feels to me like a gear stick that was designed for an age that's already left us past, because gears used to be a lot harder to select, a lot less satisfying to find. The gearbox is fine. I have no idea then why you need almost an 8-inch gear stick with a lot of travel on it. It could be that that's a nod to potential older customers who just want the extra ease of selecting their gears with less resistance and a longer travel. I personally would have liked something with a bit more immediacy. Brakes, sharp, crisp, nice, deliver what you want when you want it. They're not too dramatic, but then neither is the power and performance. Now, there's only so much you can do with 11.4 second acceleration, but there really isn't any particularly satisfying point at which to make the best of acceleration in the diesel. I'm going 70, I'm going to drop down to fourth. No, there's no power there. Let's put it in third. This is an overtaking. There's not really anything there either. You can see the point that I'm making. Now, for a lot of people, that's not going to be any form of issue whatsoever. If you do mostly town driving, and that's all you want to do, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, then it's not going to bother you at all. But I would ask you, if you live in a town, you do a lot of town driving, do you really want a manual gearbox? Automatic gearboxes are so good now. The only reason I can think of why I like to have a manual is purely for fun and dynamic driving. Well, you're not really going to be doing a whole lot of that with this diesel engine, so it's not my first pick, but it is solid, it is well built, and it does deliver a driving experience that convinces you that the car is nicely put together. So, if diesel is your thing, don't worry, it's well delivered. It just lacks ever so slightly a bit of dynamism that I would really like to see here. While we're driving across this beautiful bridge that spans right over the water here just outside of Lisbon, seems like an excellent opportunity to talk to you about the day-to-day driving experience of this car. Well, positives first. I'm really pleased to tell you that the seats do live up to their expectation. I'm not the smallest guy in the world, but there's more than enough comfort and support here not to make me feel that I don't have enough room. At the same time, I can feel good support on my back that tells me if you're a smaller driver, you're going to have more than enough support too. And that's nice. That really aids with the slightly sportier feel that Peugeot have gone for the new 208. Car road position is very good. I feel a bit more prominent and a little bit more assertive than I would in the predecessor to this car. Now, a couple of people when looking at this car have mentioned there is the potential for an enormous blind spot over your shoulder, and that's because of this huge B-pillar that we have here. But sooner or later, I knew that my short legs would come in good for something. So I fortunately have a pretty decent gap between headrest and B-pillar. And for me, it's not an issue at all. But I can tell you, if you're a taller driver with longer legs, make sure you check that out thoroughly first, because there are a couple of elements in the all-around visibility to catch you out. I'm actually pretty pleased with the rear visibility here. I don't find it limiting. And I think given the fact that the styling dictates the screen at the rear is quite small and angular, you still have more than enough space to see what you need to out at the back. Look, you're always going to need to compromise any time you go with styling over practical application. I think you want to get the balance right. In terms of how this car delivers, I think it gets it just on the money.
3A33, I see 32, then
well,
after 500 meters, keep right.
You can't win them all. Now, in terms of the rest of the driving experience, this steering wheel, wow. I really respect Peugeot for actually stepping out and saying we're going to do something that truly is different, that reflects us as a brand and who we want to be and how we want to look. Whether or not it's going to be to your taste, that is going to be a hugely personal thing to you. The more I drive with this, and I've put in a fair few miles on the 508, which has a very similar driving experience, certainly the more used to it you get, the more you even like it. Where you do have to pay careful attention is how the ratio of your height to your arm length works. Why? Well, there's a little limited travel available on the steering column, which means that if you have just the wrong combination, you won't be able to see your digital display, because in order to make it comfortable for driving, the top of this steering wheel will sit right bang in the middle of that digital display. Now, that's going to be a shame for some people and not so much of a shame for others. What do I mean? Well, it really is a significant departure from what has gone before. You now have this floating screen effect, which is essentially one screen overlaid. Visually, you'll interpret that as being about an inch in front of the other. Now, on the upside, that means that it's new, it's fresh, it's dynamic. It certainly isn't anything like what you've seen before, and that works really nicely with the styling of the car. On the not so upside, the one thing I want for any display in any car is to be able to access information quickly and simply. Now, after you've owned this car for a bit, you've gone through the myriad options in the display and in the infotainment system, I'm certain that you can set this thing up just the way you like it. But be warned, for a new user experience, it's more than a little bit disorienting, and there are so many different ways of approaching the information that you want. It can be a little bit of a distraction from driving. So don't judge this car on a test drive on your initial response to it. Like all new things, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But honestly, I think I was pretty happy with the dials the way they were. Now, outside of that, the aesthetic of the car works just as pleasingly to you when you drive as it does when you just sit in it. Everything here feels fresh, contemporary, stylish, dynamic, and none of it outside of that display really draws your attention away from where it should be. I'm going to stick with my opinion that I think really the automatic gearbox is what you want to go with. The manual isn't by any means a bad gearbox, it's just not quite as crisp and responsive as you would like. But let's see how it handles once we start pushing it around a few nice curvy bits of road. Well, the answer is actually very pleasingly. The steering that for me doesn't feel amazing at speed feels really nice and crisp on back roads. There's plenty enough weight to it and plenty enough responsiveness, but look at this and you'll see what I mean. It's just not quite as responsive as you'd like. And I guess that matches the feel that you get from the manual gearbox. So it does deliver, I suppose, what you expect. It's just that it's so dynamic and sporty in its appearance, you really want to feel just a little bit more of that reflected in the drive. But again, compare it to its predecessor and it's out of this world. You really can get a feeling driving this that there's a little bit of sports to be uncovered and you can make the most of the driving experience. I don't remember feeling that in the previous smaller engine 208, but then again, maybe I just never took it on quite the right roads. If you loved your 208 and you wanted to stay with one, I can honestly tell you, you're going to be nothing but delighted. I'm just going to see if I can figure out now how to turn the fan down. What do you think, Holger? Are you feeling optimistic that's something we can work out how to do while we're driving? Now that's just a modern infotainment issue, isn't it? I'm not quite sure how realistically possible that is. Here we go. Now I've hit the menu. And actually, you know what? That was fairly straightforward. Now I'm learning where the buttons are and things are getting easier. I can switch between those modes, but it is still quite a steep learning curve. And it's just a little bit more effort than you're comfortable going to when you want to be driving around, concentrating on the driving experience. So I don't want to sound like I'm spending all of my time complaining. Is it fun? Yes. Will it do the job of driving around town? Absolutely. If you're a Peugeot fan, if you love the 208, if you're excited to see what they've done with it, I can tell you this is going to do nothing but make you smile. Every single individual component of what Peugeot have done to the 208 has undoubtedly improved it. And it's really a very nice offer indeed. Well, that about wraps it up for the 208 from Peugeot, and my goodness, there's a lot to take in. With prices ranging at the moment anywhere from €15,000 for the base entry-level petrol, all the way up to around about 37,000 for a fully loaded electric, there is a mass of different options that you can pick from. Now, Peugeot, along with all other manufacturers, are currently stating that if you factor in maintenance, cost and fuel, really your choice between different powertrains shouldn't be a significant factor. I'm still not convinced that that's a lot beyond a marketing statement. You can see the worked through numbers, but you need to buy the car, keep the car. There's an awful lot to factor into that decision before you decide what you want. Now, Peugeot have said that initially at least they're expecting somewhere in the region of about 10% of these to sell as electrics. So that's not a massive number, but you get in the look and feel and design and every single aspect and element of this car a real deep sense that electric was the platform that this car was built and designed around. Does that mean that the petrol and the diesel failed to deliver? No, absolutely not. But there are compromises on design that have been made to take that into account. I think all for the good, and I like to look towards the future. So, which one do you go for? That's really the question. Well, that's going to be tailored around your budget. So let's break it down. If you're looking at petrol, I'm going to stick with the 100 horsepower. Why? Well, the 75, unless you're a town driver and you really never pick up any speed much at all and you like it slow and easy, clearly that's the most fuel efficient. It's also going to be the lowest insurance group. It's going to be the cheapest and easier for you. The 130, well, it doesn't deliver the punch that I really want at that weight. So the 100 represents the perfect compromise to me. Gearbox, manual or automatic? I'm automatic all the way on this car. Why? Well, the manual gearbox is fine once you get used to it, but there's a lot too much travel on that gear stick. And although it is going to give you a little bit of enhancement on speed, I'm just not looking for that in this particular car at that particular level. How about the diesel? Well, I guess that's going to come down to personal taste. It's fine. There just isn't a huge amount for me to get excited and really feel that I'm getting an extra benefit from that diesel. But that said, of course, you are going to benefit slightly more from efficiency. So I think that's going to come down to personal taste as to whether you're a diesel person or a petrol person. But if you can justify the money, my hands down pick is going to be the electric platform. Wow is all I can say. Now, before you think, yeah, we've heard it all before, I don't know if you've had the chance to watch our review of the Porsche Taycan. That is where electric can get to. But that's €185,000 at its top level. So this is a slightly different beast. If you go for the top fully loaded version of this car with electric system, you're still looking less than 40. Now that is a lot of money, but there may be government incentives where you live, and don't forget you are buying into the future of a platform here. But forget all of that. It's about driving enjoyment and your experience as a car owner. That just delivers in so many pleasing ways. It's everything that this car can be, and that's why it's my pick. Everything about the way that all of these systems work together is delivered best once you start driving the electric version. Please don't take my word for it. Please take them all out for a test drive and let me know what you think. Now, obviously, it's going to take a long time to convince a lot of person to give up their internal combustion engines, and I'm not expecting that to happen overnight, neither are Peugeot, and that's why you can still find as much refinement and as much enjoyment from the newer models with those engines as you can with the latest electric. So don't let that put you off looking at the full range. Stylistically, what has been achieved with this car is fantastic. I think to get the best out of that, you really do want to go for the GT line. This is okay in the Allure with the color matching bumper and wheel arches, but it doesn't pop in quite the same way. It doesn't say modern and stylish in quite the same way. And I think this is just looking a little bit too much like some other cars in the side. But nothing like the previous 208. I think they've done such a good job with this dramatic styling. If the interior doesn't quite appeal to your taste right off the bat, please spend a bit longer with it. I think you might find that there are some things to love there over time. And everything about the infotainment system that at first really didn't sit quite right with me, I kind of got the point of the more that I drove this car. So there's a lot to discover, a lot to set up the way you like it, and a lot ultimately to like. So, in sum, is this the best car of its type and its class? Well, that depends on the question you're asking. Is this the most sporty dynamic drive that you can have at this price point? No, categorically not. Is this the best value for money you can get? Well, I guess you could argue that, but I would say there are some other cars you should probably look at first. Is this the most modern, forward-thinking car within its class? I would argue yes. And is this the best car at its price point for delivering a fully electric platform? For me, so far, hands down, absolutely. So, whichever engine you're looking at, take this out for a drive, but do yourself a favor. Don't just take it out for a short one. Really give that new technology a chance to settle down and get used to itself. Because you know what? There is an awful lot here to like. And I hope that you'll find that too. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.